Not that I don't think Jonathan is important.
Good morning, everyone. This is the Vermont House Committee on Commerce and Economic Development. It is Thursday, January 30th, 2025 at 9 a.m. in the morning. So we're beginning our morning to introduce the committee to Community College of Vermont. We have our president with us, Judy. Royce, good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for joining us this morning. We certainly appreciate your time. It's the committee, thank you to hear all the good things that are going on at PCV.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Chair. And I'm Joyce, for the record, I'm Joyce Judy, President of the Community College of Vermont. And I have brought.
I'm Tiffany Walker, and I'm the Senior Director of Workforce at the Community College.
So thank you for this opportunity to really, Chair Marcotte asked me if we would give an overview of CCV and talk a little bit about some of our programs. So that is what we plan to do. And I'm very willing to take questions as we go along. So if people have questions, or we can wait till the end, whichever is your preference. But I'd like to begin this morning by sort of one of these mission moments that you have a person who works for your committee, Anna Race, who is an example of what CCV provides to people who take advantage of it. And I was wondering, I don't know if you have all heard her story, but I was wondering if, I did ask her before, if it was appropriate, if she could just share her CCV story with you, because I think it just is it's an illustration of what we do. Is that okay?
Great. I'd love to hear it. No, you can. Well, you might have to go. I don't know if you can't be seen. Yeah. Maybe if you just.
Here, you can see it out.
Great. That'd be.
You too, forever.
Also, you sit right there.
You're in that scene? Yeah.
How's
It's
it
very
feel?
different. Very. This is my corner.
We're the same people who normally have our backs to the.
For the record, Anna Grace O'Block, I'm the committee assistant for House Commerce. And in 2019 was my senior year of high school at South Burlington. And I took advantage of the early college program, which paid for my entire year of CCV classes. So I didn't have to go to my high school for my last year. It was an incredible program, and it actually was perfect because COVID hit right within the semester change as we were going to the spring, and I was graduating that spring, and we went online, and I graduated high school, and I realized that it was too much time to be spending alone with my parents. So I decided to keep going with my classes. And I was able to take advantage of the McClure grad gift afterwards. And I graduated from CCV with my Associates of Science in Business in December 2020, about 6 months after I graduated high school. So
Nice.
I love CCV.
Went on to.
I did. I went on to take advantage of some more programs. And I was working at Starbucks and learned of the Starbucks College Achievement Program, which, as long as I worked 20 hours a week, I was able to go online to Arizona State University, and they paid my tuition in full for my first bachelor's degree. And I just graduated about a month ago.
Wow.
Now I'm here.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm gonna go back to my corner.
Well, I have to say, when I found out that she was staffing this, I just thought, it's just such a wonderful example of how we reach Vermonters and provide opportunities. And it really begins with the support of the legislature in terms of these programs. So, I'm going to give a quick overview of CCV, then I'm going to talk a little bit about affordability and the challenges that we have, because higher education is expensive. And how do we continue to work at making sure that Vermonters have the skills that they need to get the jobs that are here? It's just in some ways, it's really about economic development at the very core. So just a quick overview of CCV. Some of you have heard this before, but for those who are new, CCV is one of the two institutions in the Vermont State Colleges. So there's Vermont State University now, that is made up of the former legacy institutions of Johnson, Castleton, Vermont Tech, and Linden. And so they are Vermont State University, and then the second institution in the Vermont State Colleges is CCV. And we have been in existence since 1970. CCV was created under the guidance and the vision of Governor Dean Davis. And his whole approach was, how do you bring education to Vermonters in a very rural state? And so there are community colleges in every state in the country, but CCV is incredibly unique because there is only one community college in Vermont. Most states have several community colleges at different locations. We have one college with 12 locations and a very robust online program. So in some ways, CCV thinks of ourselves as the open end of a funnel. So we really are there to provide opportunities for Vermonters to either continue their education or get started with higher education. And we serve people from, as you saw, high school students from 16, 17 to people in their 70s and 80s. Last year, as an example, at graduation, our youngest graduate was 17 and our oldest was 69. So you get the span. We also, we take a lot of pride. We serve a lot of veterans. Every semester, we have probably between 300 and 400 veterans and military connected students, because many of the veterans, it's transitioning from military life to civilian life. They have a lot of skills, but it's hard for them to make that transition. And so we provide a lot of opportunity for them. In terms of CCV and numbers, we are the second largest institution in the state, second only to the University of Vermont, but serve more Vermonters just because of the nature. 96% of the 10,000 Vermonters that we serve are Vermonters. And so, as we think about CCV's role, for us, it's our students they're Vermonters, and they're also, do we need to? Okay. Okay. I didn't want to be oblivious to it. Like I was like, something that was really going on. Yeah, there you go. All good. That's all right.
Conspicuous.
You know what? And we're all humans. I mean, those things happen and, yeah. So just to back up, CCV serves 10,000 Vermonters a year. And, one of the things I do student orientations for students. We actually do them all remotely now and serve, we get hundreds of students in our orientations. But I say to them, in classes, our classes are intentionally small, between 10 and 20 students, because we want students to feel like they're a participant in their learning. There's a lot of personal attention, but I tell them they're part of a much bigger network and a web, because there are 10,000 Vermonters who access courses every year at CCV. We've just launched our spring semester. I know it doesn't look like spring. That's what I say to students, but I tell them, but by the time you're about done your class, we will have green grass. I'm sure of that. So I'm hopefully sure that by the end of April, beginning of May, we will have green grass. But we're running about 550 classes right now. Some of them we run a combination of in-person, and we also run a fair number of remote courses. Prior to COVID, we served about 40% of our classes were virtual, because that's how adults, whether they're 18 or 80, have figured out that's how they can access learning and manage it with working childcare or elderly care responsibilities. It's just a way that, many of us would prefer to learn in person, but when it comes down to what can I fit in my life? Oftentimes the remote option is the option, especially here in Vermont. As we know, winter travel is tough. And if you live in a far corner and you're traveling an hour to a class, it's easier to hop on and do it virtually. So right now, about 70% of our classes, we're running remote. Now, we have a lot of different flavors of remote courses. We run courses that are fully online in a very traditional sense, But we also run a lot of hybrid where some sections are some classes are in person and some classes are remote. We also are really growing popularity, growing module or method in our mix is what we call the synchronous program, where many pieces of the course are taught totally virtually. But then maybe once every 2 weeks, once every 3 weeks, they meet synchronously virtually, like we're doing today. And so they really feel it's that sense of community and sense of getting to know each other, but they don't have to all be in the same room at the same time. So that's I think that is going to continue to be a growing piece for us. And again, I think that one of our biggest challenges is affordability, and we continue to struggle with that in Vermont because CCV is one of the most expensive community colleges in the country. I think it's just been historic that Vermont has always put a fair amount of money to K-12 and there's been less to spend on higher education. It's just the way it is. We figured out how to manage and do that, but it does impact the ability of Vermonters to continue their education. Because one of the things that we see, and I'll just use New England as an example, Vermont has the lowest college continuation rate of any state in New England for high school students. We only about 50% of students who graduate from high school continue on in their education. Now, and that's been a really tough nut to crack because, we've surveyed students and we've asked them, and so many of them, it really comes down to affordability. But as you heard from Anna Grace, that, there are opportunities, and this committee has historically been, sort of one of the places where you have always, thought about affordability with us and really figured out some programs to support students. And so, we have dual enrollment, we have early college, which, and we are really seeing, yes, dual enrollment in early college is available to all students, but the number of low-income first-generation BIPOC populations that are taking those courses is increasing every year, which is really what we need to be doing. And the 802 Opportunity Program that we have with VSAC is been amazing. And some of the kernels of this happened right here in this committee, and you have always been supportive of it. For those of you who aren't familiar with the 802 Opportunity Program, it is a program that is administered through VSAC. And I will say VSAC is a huge partner for us. And it provides free CCV tuition to any family or individual whose family income is less than $75,000 a year, which is huge because that's half of all Vermonters. So that is a huge program. Now it's the last dollar in, so students have to apply for financial aid, but it has been a game changer. I will also say in the governor's budget this year, and VSAC has proposed to use their 3.5% or 3% appropriation increase to put all their funding. I think I'm not stealing Scott Giles' thunder, but to put all that funding towards increasing the threshold for 802 opportunity from $75,000 to $100,000, because we're seeing if you're a family of four and you're making $80,000 right now, there is no funding, there are no grant opportunities for you. And I would challenge all of us to think about, even the best money managers with a family of four trying to live on $80,000 and then have discretionary money to go to school, it's pretty tough. So increasing the threshold would be huge, again, huge for Vermonters. And then this question, yeah.
Which threshold were you talking about?
For the 802 opportunity, it would go from $75,000 to $100,000 for family income. So, and I don't have the figure of how many more Vermonters, but for the conversations that Scott and I have had, this is a critical group between 75 and 100,000, because these are people that oftentimes have good jobs, but they're looking to advance, but they don't have the discretionary income to invest in themselves to get that next level of job. So between people that are earning between 75 and 100,000, they are working. They're doing, but they can't get ahead because they're sort of at this place where there's not funding available to support them, but they also they're barely paying their bills. So that's the reason for the increasing the 75 to 100. Vermont Tuition Advantage, again, this is a program that was created to support Vermonters who are going into high demand fields to support their tuition to continue their education. And it was interesting because we started these programs really over the Vermont Tuition Advantage was specifically during COVID. So kudos to all of you, and kudos to the administration that when the federal CARES money was coming down to Vermont very intentionally decided that they would take a significant portion of that money and give it to Vermonters who are impacted by COVID to continue their education. And that's when we saw a huge uptick in the number of Vermonters continuing their education. So when we think about the low college going rate or continuation rate for Vermonters, and when I say college, I'm a believer that people need to continue their education beyond high school. College isn't for everyone, but some form of education. And so when I say 50%, that includes apprenticeships, that includes enrolling in college, that includes military. So we've got work to do if we want to engage all Vermonters. And so what we found during COVID, when we really looked at affordability and addressed it in a way that has been more aggressive than Vermont has ever done, we saw more Vermonters engaging in continuing their education. And we did a number of surveys, and every survey came back that the number one reason why people had chosen to go back to school now versus why hadn't they done this before was 96% said that it was because of money. So we have a challenge in front of us. And then the last thing that I will mention around affordability is just this morning on the news, and I've heard the inklings of it before, but I heard more details of it today. Okay, so New York has announced that they are giving free community college tuition to all adults. Massachusetts did that. Massachusetts now is for any Massachusetts residents, it's free community college. Maine has just done that. So I raise that because if Vermont is going to keep people here and keep people engaged, I don't want us to be left behind. And so I have to keep, because when I see that every time I'm like, we have pieces in place. We have dual enrollment. We have early college. We have the 802 opportunity. What would it take to get us to the other side? Because it's powerful when New York can say any New Yorker who wants to continue their education can now do this for free. And the governor's pitch was, this is about, we have all these good jobs in New York. We want New Yorkers to have them. She said, it's great to bring people in. I was like listening to her. She said, it's great to bring people in, but I also want New Yorkers to have these jobs. So I make that pitch. I wasn't planning to talk about it, but it's just really on my mind this morning. I was like, oh, we're getting surrounded by all of this. And we do want young people to stay in Vermont and not go other places just because of education.
She also was talking about the CHIPS Act.
Yes.
And the tech.
Yes.
We have
We do. Yeah.
Lots of money.
Yeah.
The CHIPS Act, and we now have that tech hub at UVM. So
Yeah.
You know, it's an opportunity for us to take advantage.
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
When we bring Joyce back in again, when we're
Yeah.
talking about budget and talking
Yeah.
to BZAC and
Yeah.
talking with the McClure Foundation.
Yeah.
I think we really need to start thinking about that and pushing that idea towards our other colleagues and to the administration as well, that we really need to think about this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I think, if we should start seeing, the return on investment that we made
Yeah.
since COVID.
Yeah.
And made those changes and, you know, the best way of raising people is to give them a good education.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yes. And we saw, you know, with the even Vermont Tuition Advantage, we're talking about thousands of Vermonters who access that program. I mean, it wasn't insignificant. The other piece, you know, as Mike, as you mentioned, yes, the McClure Free Degree Promise, they funded it. They funded it for 5 years. We are now in third year. We have 2 more years. And what they are hoping is that they've proved a concept that by providing the opportunity for students to get their education at no cost to them. It's not free because someone has to pay for it, but no cost to them or their families. We are seeing a huge uptick, but I am concerned about in 2 years. The McClure Foundation has been an incredibly supportive partner for us, but they also don't have a bottomless pit. And so how do we begin to, you know, work on building that? But I think it's a bigger question in terms of, because Vermont has put a lot of pieces in place, but how do we just sort of take all those pieces and make the final leap? So I'm going to stop there. I do want Tiffany to talk about some of the programs, because it will give you a sense of, we do associate degrees, we do credentials, but we also do some very targeted things. And we've been very fortunate to land a lot of grants that have enabled us to leverage our state appropriation and our tuition dollars to do other things. So I'm going to turn it over to Tiffany.
Great, thank you. So workforce at CCV, as you can tell from what Joyce said, our students are the workforce. And so we don't silo workforce development separately from other things at the college. It's woven through everything that we do. And partnerships with businesses are really vital to what happens with our students as they go through their programs. And I'm going to talk to you a little about our Career Pathways Entry Program, which we were able to get a Northern Borders Regional Commission grant for. And this program pairs really early experiences with employers with college level education. So instead of waiting the traditional way where you wait to the end of your time and suddenly hear all the employers at the end of your time, we decided let's bring them to the front and have people work with them right from the beginning. So we have our first cohort started in 24, and this is a pairing of college level credit bearing courses in a field of the choice of the participant with an employer in that field. And they get to do paid job shadows. So they're not stopping. We've seen this gap of affordability is also, I can't stop my work and do this. I need to be able to continue to work. So these are paid job shadows where they get to go in and experience different parts of the business and earn college credit along with an industry credential in the field that they've chosen. So in our very first cohort, we had 37 participants. We had 20 business partners all around the state in manufacturing, healthcare, and human services. There were 700 job shadow hours gained by those students, 81 college credits earned, 18 industry recognized credentials earned, and it's about 52% male and 48% female, which at the college, it's 30% male. So we're seeing men engaging in this program. We have 62 people lined up who want this now for summer for our next cohort. So we're finding those placements. And I'll be really specific with you on an experience that a student was able to have. He went to a job fair and met Beta. Everybody wants into Beta. Beta is cool. It's made manufacturing fun again. People really want to be there. And Beta said, go to CCV. So our partnership with Beta, we've created right from the beginning in all kinds of ways. We do lots of work with Beta. And we knew they didn't even have a manufacturing facility yet, but we started working with them prior to them having it so that we could be right there when they needed us. So they sent him to us. We put him in the CPEP program. He took a college level course in manufacturing, got to do paid job shadows. And now he is a full-time Beta employee that fast. That's how quick these things were able to happen. He was in our 24 cohort and he's working at his dream job at Beta. We have another, a woman, Alicia, who was unemployed. She had a high school diploma. She really wanted to go into human services, had no experience, and she could not make her way into there. Same thing. She got connected through the Howard Center to our program in human services for CPEP. And the same thing, she's now working there full time as a care manager. And so this is a really fast track for people to start their college career. They can continue on, Beta and all of these other businesses encourage them to continue on and get their degrees while they're working, but they're able to do it very quickly. It's not at the end of the line in 2 years or 4 years from now. It's right at the beginning. In healthcare, we do healthcare pieces in CPEP, but we also have very large healthcare programming at CCV. We have over 1,400 students enrolled in healthcare programs at CCV. We have a health science meta major, but we also have 5 certificate programs under that. And really mindful partnerships with businesses and our sister institution in order for people to go on. So people are able to take their coursework early at CCV. They can be working at the business, stay in their current job at the business, and then walk down the hall and take classes and go back to their work and then start the shadowing of the future jobs that they're going to have. So the employer is able to have people that are already here in Vermont, they're already committed, but they are underemployed with them and they can get them, get their education through. And these partnerships with VTSU and UVM are really important to us in having them be able to go on to nursing programs and other pieces. In fact, over 90% of students that go on to VTSU in nursing started at CCV, and they're very, very successful. Their average first term GPAs are 3.0, above a 3.0, and their success rate in key courses is above 90% if they start with us first. So they have that opportunity to grow their understanding of being in classroom, taking education, and also they can pare it down. They can take A&P with us, for instance, not take it when we're taking their nursing class. Our pathways with employers have been incredible in this area. We know that we've had nursing issues with getting nurses. And so we started in 2019 with Central Vermont Medical Center in trying this idea of building groups of people in order to get them through. And we have had people graduating ever since then from nursing programs that started with this partnership program. We now have 63 students selected by employers all around the state to go into these pathway programs. We customize those pathways specific to every employer. This is what we need. We need this group of people in all of these different positions. We customize it to them and they're able to take programs. Sometimes they take classes that are only for that hospital. Sometimes they filter into CCV classes all around the state that are already running in all of the different formats that Joyce mentioned.
And when Tiffany talks about customizing, here's an example. So, and we learn all the time. So, like there are hospitals that use medical assistants. Some use medical assistants for like just administrative jobs. Others use medical assistants for like you go in and they'll take your blood pressure and so it's very interesting when we work with a hospital, like Brattleboro Memorial Hospital really uses medical assistants very differently than say Central Vermont. So they told us at Brattleboro, okay, we don't want nationally credentialed medical assistants. And we do, but we want them to have these 5 courses. And so we worked really closely with them so that then when they get done, they'll hire them as medical assistants. At Central Vermont, it was much more, no, we want to create a pipeline, not for medical assistants, but for LPNs. So it really, we try, where are the pinch points? If a hospital could choose, they would choose all the pinch points. But I think sometimes it's, okay, where is your biggest pinch point and how can we most quickly help you address that particular issue? So it's been very interesting, I think, in the times that, as we think about our work with employers, because we're in such a tight employment situation, employers are so much more creative than they were, say, 10 years ago. And it's not the fault of employers, it's just where we all are. And so trying to develop really creative programs, we are sort of, it's so out of the box thinking than what, if I was here 10 years ago talking to you, no, we'd be doing this and then we'd be doing this. So,
Yeah. So I think piece here with all of those pieces that I've mentioned is the true earn and learn idea. It really is an earn and learn philosophy of how can I be earning an income in the field that I want to go into while I'm learning. And I think that these have been, the partnerships with employers have really been incredible in that, in allowing for that. Early childhood education, I think, very important for us in the state. And we come at this in a lot of different ways at CCV. We have stackable certificate programs in childcare, after school, and youth work, and ECE admin. We have an associate degree in ECE, and it's our largest degree program with close to 400 students that were enrolled last fall. We have these ECE portfolio scholarships that support students working in the field to pursue prior learning credits so that they can accelerate themselves to degree. And then we have the Northern Lights program at CCV, which is really the hub of Vermont's professional development system for the ECE workforce, with all of the laddering pieces there. Did you have?
And just, I was just going to say a couple of things. The Northern Lights program is we have a large grant from the Agency of Human Services to administer the childcare professional development program for the state of Vermont. So we have both training programs specifically so that as childcare workers, in order for them to move up the pay scale and to move up in terms of responsibilities, they have to go through a lot of training, and someone has to manage that database. We manage the database. We also provide the training, and then many of them continue on towards associate degrees. And the scholarships that Tiffany was just referring to, we have a couple of amazing philanthropic donors who have stepped forward and have funded a lot of early childhood ed scholarships because of just the issue in the state of Vermont. And we are really grateful to those individuals.
And we are working with communities when they let us know that they have something coming up, something exciting, opening a childcare center or pieces like that. How do we get in right at the beginning, start educating people in high school so that they're ready to work when those places open? So we're really trying to plant seeds as well for ECE all around the state. And I think it's good to mention, especially with that, there are a lot of credentials in the pathway of ECE, just like there are in a lot of the other things that we do. We embed credentials into our programming at CCV so that people have these credentials that businesses appreciate when they come in. And in fiscal year 23 into 24, we had 2,553 individual credentials that people earned alongside their credit-bearing pieces. We do work with Google. We do work with Amazon. We have all kinds of these data analytics boot camps, cloud, all of these things that people are like, I don't even know what those people do. And then they come in and they do these amazing programs. And
I don't know what they do.
But early childhood is a big piece of that, along with technology. And before I go into my last speech, which is corrections, I want to drop the cool factor. We have a really neat Metallica grant. Yes, from the Metallica. So Metallica.
It's pretty, it's pretty
cool.
fascinating.
So Metallica gives a lot of money away. And so when they go to communities, they a portion of all of their
Now
tickets.
I can ask all of you because I didn't even know what Metallica. I had never listened to one of their songs, and all of a sudden they are a foundation that supports community colleges in a very big way. And so Tiffany, we wrote this grant, and go ahead.
We wrote this grant, really wanted the Metallica grant, even though Joyce doesn't know who Metallica is. We did, and we're very excited about it. And so Metallica really wants to get people into the trades, into neat, tech programs for CCV. It is tech-based, so we're really looking to increase the number of people in cybersecurity. Especially rural hospitals, but rural businesses are really at risk with cyber. And we need people to see that we need cyber individuals all through the state who have these abilities. So that is what we're doing with this, is really trying to get people into these tech programs and see that they can do it right here in Vermont. And so Metallica is a really neat way to do that. They're very supportive, incredible people that I think it really surprises people how much money they give away. So one of the fun things for our students is they will have the opportunity to crew at some Metallica concerts. And this is really the tech piece. They get to see the high tech stuff. They're still,
And they
they're
provide
still
us
filling
it's the
stadiums. Yeah.
scholarships. They give money to
That's really
support
cool.
students.
Yeah.
Oh, it's cool.
They get to be rigorous, yeah.
Do it.
The amount of stuff that goes into, I think they do 210 semis or something. It's just really mind blowing how much stuff they put up. They need a lot of people. So there'll be an online component where they can learn about it and then they'll be able to go. Now for us, it's Philly and I think Syracuse are the closest concerts, but maybe over time we'll get them to come a little bit closer. But Metallica is still filling stadiums. So we're really excited about Metallica and the brand recognition that we have with that. We were able to go to Texas recently and meet with other schools. They now have every state and Guam are represented with Metallica grants. And so we were able to have conversations, particularly to us with rural schools. How are you bringing people in? And we've asked the Metallica folks to really help us work with other rural schools on how they're doing this. It works great in big cities, these huge programs and massive community colleges that have a lot of people, but we would really like to see how rural colleges are able to make it happen. So my last piece, I should have probably dropped the mic with Metallica, but I'm going to go.
Oh, yeah.
And it's, I didn't stop you all before, but can you talk about how CCV and adult technical education interplay?
Yes, so, I'll take a step back and. Yeah, do you mean the high school technical program or the adult tech?
Both of them.
Okay, so I'll take a step back. We have a Carl Perkins grant where so Carl Perkins money comes into primarily through the Agency of Education to support technical centers and community college. So we get a small portion of what comes into the state. And the whole goal is to create pathways from technical center programs to higher education. So we do a lot of work with tech centers. We offer, and I don't have the numbers, but I would venture to say it's 300 or 400 students enrolled in dual enrollment courses at the tech centers through their tech center programs that will then transition, hopefully, to higher education. They will leave the tech center. And that has become a huge recruiting tool for tech centers. Because I think for many of us, tech centers years ago were thought of as, people would just go there to hang out. And oftentimes, if there was a discipline problem, they weren't thought of as people who go there are going to continue on into college. And I think that's slowly changing. And so we feel like tech center students are our students of the future. And so how do we create opportunities and have them think that they could go on to college or go on, can at least continue their education. So planting seeds. So we are heavily invested in tech centers, particularly funded through our Carl Perkins grant. So that's one piece. With the adult technical center programs, those adults have access to the same opportunities as the high school students that we've created for students. So I think that, one of the things that's hard for us as a statewide entity is the adult tech center programs are very inconsistent throughout the state. There are some very strong ones. Essex is amazing. And then you have others where they're not. And so the funding for adult tech center programs has really ebbed and flowed. So, I can remember at a time when the state funded an adult tech ed coordinator for every tech center in the state. Then that went away completely, and tech center coordinators had to raise their own raise their own salaries. And so they did things like a lot of photography, a lot of things that were popular as opposed to economic development pieces. And so I think so I would say that I think we have different relationships with different tech centers, tech center coordinators, just because of where they're at in terms of their own programs. But I would say, I think one of the things that's really important, and I think we have this kind of reputation, I hope we do, is that there's so much work to be done that we don't want to duplicate. So if adult tech ed is doing, like filling the space of entry-level computer programs, courses in a community, then we don't need to be doing that. So I think trying to figure out, and then I think, the other player is adult basic education, Vermont adult learning, this is also the challenge of Vermont. We are a small state. Most states have one adult basic ed provider. Vermont has 4. So that's fine, except we have to create a relationship with 4 different entities and they operate very differently. It's the way it always has been in Vermont. So we don't know any different, but when I talk to my colleagues in other states, they'll be like, you have 4 in Vermont? And I'll be like, yep, we do. And so I think that for us, it's really trying to create pathways. And I think when Tiffany describes the work we do with businesses and other entities, one of the things that CCV has really is primarily our mode of operation is our work is about anytime we offer a course, we try to make it the equivalent of college level learning so people get college credit out of it. So that it's a stackable credential, so that if people are working in the adult basic ed sphere, they're working on getting their skills ready to enroll in college. So that's not our space. Our space is really about helping students gain college credit so that they might get an industry recognized credential, they might get a certificate, they might get an associate degree, they might be transferring on to UVM or VTSU to get a degree. But so our work primarily is in the college credit sphere. Does that answer your question? Ask me more specific and I'm happy to.
About what you answered in part, right? Are we duplicating efforts and you're working hard not to? Are the credentials that they come to you with from those programs, can they continue with them? Are you looking at, what is the path and who's doing which part of the path? Sounds like.
Yeah, I would say that they're a feeder to us because neither the adult tech ed programs or the adult basic ed, if they're just operating independently, have college level. That's their place is pre-college work. Then it's the handoff. So in many of our local communities, like adult basic ed, we do so much work with them because so many of their students aspire to go on once they get sort of their sea legs and get their high school diploma. So adult basic ed is, in terms of they don't offer college level coursework. They tend to offer more pre-college work. But what we're all hoping is that no matter where a student enters, that they know where they can go if they want to continue their education, and making sure that people know those pathways. So we try to have good relationships. I mean, Vermont communities are small. So I think that that's really key for us.
My other question is a little more difficult, a little more touchy.
Yeah.
So you talked about how expensive it is
Yeah.
to go to CCV,
Yeah.
and you talked about also how 70% of your classes are online.
Yeah.
remote.
Yeah.
So when you look at your campuses, are they still right-sized?
It's a really good question, and it's something we've been spending a lot of time. We have, in most of our locations, we have more physical footprint than we need. And so I'll give you 2 or 3 examples of how we've addressed that just in the last 2 or 3 years. So in Middlebury, we are now co-located with the Vermont Community Foundation. We own 3 of our buildings. We own a building in Winooski, we own our building in Montpelier, and we own our building in Upper Valley. We rent 9. So, years ago, you entered into leases, long-term leases, so you could get the economic benefit. Now we don't enter into long-term leases because we don't know what the world is going to look like. But the other piece is, as our leases become renewable, it's a chance for us to say, okay, where are we? So we left our lease in Middlebury. We co-located in a much smaller, we now share common space with the Vermont Community Foundation. It's an example. In Morrisville, we reduced our footprint by 2/3. We only have 1 classroom now in Morrisville, where we used to have 5. So when our leases, And then again in St. Johnsbury, we are now co-located with the Fairbanks Museum. They did their expansion. They invited us to be a partner. We were happy to. It lined up. So we gave up a much larger footprint for something smaller, but we're so happy to be so tight with the Fairbanks Museum, and we get to share common space. So they have classrooms. We have one classroom. They can use our classroom, can use their facilities. So those are three examples of where when we are looking constantly, because, staff get tired of hearing me say this, but we are stewards of our student tuition, and we're not going to spend it on empty spaces and stuff that's not used. I'd rather spend it on either one, reducing their, so we don't have to keep increasing tuition, or two, on staffing to support students. So, physical space, I think physical space is, I don't know what the answer is, but we are looking at it really closely because we cannot pay for empty spaces. So we look at utilization a lot.
Couple questions.
Yeah.
On this whole thing about space and campus and co-locating. Do you do a lot with, I guess, what am I talking about? Like a college to company pipeline? Like, are you doing like entrepreneurship training, and are we able to engage space use with that?
Do you mean, so having, do we offer courses in
Entrepreneurship.
in entrepreneurship? Yes, we do. And then
Are we seeding companies in doing that sort of work?
seeding in terms of having companies come into CCV, or are we trying to have our students think that they could be?
Helping our students
Become-
create startups.
Yeah.
And helping give them space even
Yep.
to create those startups.
Okay, we don't give students space to create the startups. It's an interesting idea. But we like courses like small business management, where they develop a business plan. Those are quite popular courses. So I would say that we try to work, Vermont is made up of small businesses. And so, most of our programs require a professional field experience. So while Tiffany talked about, job shadowing on the front end, most of our programs require students to spend some time in a business at the end of their program, whether it's small or large. And some of them, most of our students are working, and most of them are in a job that perhaps they want to continue in. And so some of them develop their professional job experience at their current location, but it's not with their current job. It's how do they continue. But I will say that our professional field experience course is probably our best career development thing that we could do for students, because the number of students who get jobs out of their professional field experience is pretty phenomenal. Because it's a long interview. It's hours. Yeah.
So my name's Abby Duke from Arlington.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. So we spent yesterday morning learning about and really talking about the small business landscape in Vermont. And
Yeah.
I don't have the numbers on top of my head, but the thousands of businesses we have, fewer than 9 employees,
Mhm.
and their technical assistance and education needs.
Yeah.
And Linda Rossi from
Yeah.
SBDC was
Yeah.
there and talking about how they co-locate with institutes of higher
Yeah.
education. And so there was excitement about kind of like, how can we help
Yeah.
all those small business, like I was just on your website looking at the bookkeeping classes, but I'm just wondering if there's discussion about there's like the supporting the really big employers,
Yeah.
like Beta, who
Yeah.
have resources to
Yeah.
help.
Yeah.
But then is there some thought about how do we support those? I
Yeah.
don't remember the number, it's like, thousands.
49,000.
Businesses,
Yeah.
fewer than 9
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
Who, maybe don't have.
Yeah.
The business owners themselves maybe don't even really understand the bookkeeping that they're
Yeah.
doing. So anyway, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I think, this is a challenge in Vermont when you have small businesses. So I grew up on a farm in New Hampshire, and my family still farms. And, the idea that they would send, and my brothers are, we all went to college, so we're an educationally, inclined business, but for my brothers to think that they would take and have the time to send one of their employees for a day to do whatever, no, they don't have a lot of, duplication, if you're not there and if you're sick, it's a problem. If we're going to send you off for a day, that's a problem. So really, like, I get that in my bones in terms of, these small businesses don't have the means, or they hire just enough people to do their operation. So to think that, like, it's different than a beta, it's different than a hospital where you have some redundancy, you have that kind of stuff. When it's 6 people, no, we can't do the work with 5 because we have 6 people. So I do think, in terms of, I do think that's why our remote options are so important, because this is why our early childhood ed program has really exploded. It was very interesting. Pre-COVID, all the trainings, there was a regulation by the state that all the trainings that were offered by Northern Lights had to be in person. And we couldn't get that nut cracked. But now, the fact that you can do them they can be by Zoom, and a childcare provider could do it over their lunch hour. The number of people who have committed to increasing their education has exploded because, if I work all day with kids and I go home at 6 o'clock at night, you think I want to go out again for a 3-hour class? They're not going to do that. So I think, to your question, I think that it's a challenge. It's a huge challenge. I think 2 things I would say. Our professional field experience course does put students into small businesses, which is huge. And then I also think the remote options. I also think, that we can't overlook that the 802 Opportunity Program, if we raise the threshold to 100,000, it does begin to, okay, because these folks in small businesses can make a decent living there, but they don't have the money to invest. The business doesn't have money to, provide professional development, but they need to continue their education. Does that answer your question? I don't want to beat around. It's a challenge.
So,
But I think if we can put a few pieces more in place, that would be good.
About 7 minutes left,
Okay.
and I'd like Tiffany to be able to finish up.
Yeah, corrections.
Oh, great.
And if we have a couple of more minutes, we can, otherwise we'll certainly bring it back. It's very, a lot of questions that are generated through these conversations that are really good.
Yeah.
Information and good questions.
Thanks, questions. The last thing I'm going to talk about is our corrections post-secondary education program. We have had the opportunity to partner with Department of Corrections to bring higher education into the facilities, long-term facilities. This program is really unique in the country, have found, because it educates both incarcerated individuals and also employees of corrections. We're able to work with corrections officers and other employees at corrections and allow them to take programming. Really across CCV, they can choose from programming that they would like to take. We also work with incoming corrections academy, people coming in to become corrections officers. I have the opportunity to go up and work with them in person. And we talk about empathy and curiosity and all kinds of things, and get them hopefully interested in continuing their education further at CCV. But really, I'd like to talk to you about bringing these college level courses into the facilities, which is quite a challenge, in bringing together these 2 organizations in order to have this mission of, we hope, lowering recidivism and increasing opportunity for people when they've been released. We've served so far 331 unique students. 210 of those were incarcerated, and 121 are family and staff. So we were able to widen this to the family of staff members last year, and we are seeing a really big uptick in people using that. For this past semester, there's 118 individual incarcerated students. And they're taking, this is, if you can put this into scale, it's over 13% of the total population. And we've only just started. So it's really exciting to see that. We have 10 courses across 4 of the long-term facilities right now. So we're at Chittenden at the women's facility. We're up in Newport, we're in St. Albans, and we're down in Springfield. And we're offering classes really across the curriculum to help people gain a professional studies certificate and degree. And then from there, we're hoping to bring in manufacturing and other pieces as soon as we can. Our challenge right now is technology. So we've been working on increasing the technology pieces so that we can offer classes in that way as well for our students. So our teachers could be piped in on the way that we're doing it today. And so I think the biggest piece here for us is CCV looking for ways to increase the number of qualified workers in Vermont who can go into great degree programs, but also into careers. And we want those things paired together and working with people, businesses, organizations, VSAC, adult basic ed, corrections, but also all of our business partners to get all of these programs going. Is there anything more to do?
No, I would just say that, we were very fortunate. We got a congressionally directed spending grant from, championed by Senator Sanders. It was $4.5 million. So it wasn't insignificant to really launch this program in a very big way. And, when Tiffany talks about corrections officers and people who are incarcerated, I oftentimes get, are they taking the same courses? No. We work really closely with the Department of Corrections. Commissioner Demmel is superb. I'm a champion of his because I think that he is someone he's really thinking in a more positive way as opposed to, because the majority of people who are incarcerated today are going to be released into Vermont communities. And if we can lower the recidivism rate, even by 10% from the 50% to 40%, what a gift it would be for all of us and for Vermont communities. And so our goal in offering courses is it's less about a degree. I don't care if they get a degree. What we hope is that we are planting some hope. We are helping people think differently about themselves, and we are thinking that we are giving them some skills so that when they get out, they are in a different place. And we're just launching this semester. We got approval to extend this program to people who transition out. So now they can access this program for a year after they transition out. It is huge. We just hired a person who was incarcerated for 10 years. He took this program and now he works for CCV. And I will tell you, we learned so much from him in terms of the intricacies and what we should and shouldn't be doing. But I will tell you that if you ever have the opportunity to go into a facility and sit in on a class, it is the most profound and sobering educational experience I've had. People are so grateful to be able to access this as an opportunity when they are incarcerated. And Andy Polito was, he was the Commissioner of Corrections for 11 years here in Vermont, and then he became our Dean of Administration. He's since retired. I can't believe he retired, but he did. But he often said to me, there are three, he said, I think of people who are incarcerated in three buckets. He said, there's one bucket, it's like you and me, but they made a stupid choice and now they're paying for it. He said, there's another bucket with guidance and support, they could be very productive citizens. And then there's another bucket that, they're tough individuals and they probably need to be where they are. And so we're really focusing on those two other buckets, but how do we help them so that when they do transition out, they can be more productive? So we're pretty excited about our work, and we figured out a way to make it financially sustainable when this goes away, because Pell Grants now are, people who are incarcerated are eligible for Pell Grants. So there's a tuition source to support this as it goes on. But it's pretty, we find it pretty exciting work. I think it could be really profound. Commissioner Demmel talks about that it's changed the culture in some of the facilities. That's pretty strong. Yeah. So we'll stop there. As you can see, we can talk forever about.
If you can see, we can ask questions forever too. Thank you. We will certainly be asking you to come back in again, as I said before, when we start looking at, when we get our from appropriations, what to look at when in the budget. If, I think next time we can get data, would be great to understand, the numbers of people going in,
Absolutely.
the graduation numbers.
Yeah.
Are you able to follow those people at all after they've graduated to understand where they're going, how they're doing?
You know, I would like to tell you yes, but I will tell you not so good. You know, we work with the Department of Labor in terms of, you know, it's wage increases. But, you know, it's always, there's such a lag and it's so hard to get that data that I will say that that's not that useful. We do graduate surveys. We do graduate surveys 5 years out, but it's all self-reporting. So so we're not great at it, but we have some data, but I wish it was much more thorough.
Yeah, I'm wondering if there's maybe a way of getting some data from the tax department as well.
Mhm.
But, and I think knowing how many Vermonters are accessing, how many Vermonters are staying here,
Yeah,
you know, and I think the majority of Vermonters that are going to CCV and then are generally going on to
Yeah.
State University is one of them.
Yeah.
And then the majority are staying here.
Yeah.
Getting jobs, and
Yeah.
after they've gone through all of this, I'm sure they're getting pretty good jobs too.
yeah. And one of the things, you know, a subtle shift that we've made in the last few years has been moving to far more credentials. Because that's what businesses have been saying to us, you know, it's more of a short term built. And so really, we've developed a lot of credentials specifically with businesses that this is the cluster of courses we want. And if students had this, we'll hire them for these jobs. So, yeah,
Very good choice. Thank you.
great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think we gave them any materials.
We didn't give them this time, but I'm happy when we come back, we'll bring. Okay, Jonathan, I'm gonna meet you. Yes, yes, yes. So your wife is one of my favorites and it's terrific.
So will that data download that you provide us the next time include the Metallica schedule and?
There you go. Yes, and maybe some tickets. I now have a t-shirt, a Metallica t-shirt, because we were one of 17 schools, and so the schools are on the back. It's kind of cool.
It looks like tour dates, but it's.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
Education for all.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Where's everybody going? Yes, I'm gonna break at 10:30, so. You can shut the door. Doug, good morning.
Good morning. Forgive me, but the background image is, I think, visible to you, but not me.
Oh, yes, it is. We see the State House.
Well, that's better than nothing.
Well, thanks for joining us this morning. I know you have a hard stop at 10:30 and whatever we don't get to, we'll certainly invite you back.
Well, I appreciate that. And I know you have a lot of new members on the committee, and congratulations to all of you for your success. And you may or may not know much about my office, so I'm here to give you the lightning round. Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay. It's pretty straightforward, really, although it's not well understood by most people. It is a constitutional office, one of 5. Traditionally, the office did financing and compliance auditing, all still important, but not done by my office. We farm that out. It's tedious. It's not terribly interesting, but it's important to both Wall Street and the people of the state. So we get it done, but it leaves us free to do performance auditing. I'm sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Performance auditing was not a standard part of state auditors' work plan until about the 90s, when the Government Auditing Standards Board suggested to auditors, you know, following the money and the federal compliance piece is very important and you have to do it, but it's not the end of the story. It's really, you know, the beginning of a more interesting and relevant part to most taxpayers and arguably to you, because the point is, we know where the money is, we can track it, we know about compliance, but the remaining question is, are the administrators, is the executive branch administering the programs that you have created and funded in the way that you intended, and are they achieving the goals that you hoped for? That is performance auditing. And there are very strict standards for performance auditing through GAGAS, which is, the standards published by the GAO. It stands for Generally Accepted Government Auditing Standards, and those are our professional standards, as is the case across the country. So it's a big deal. It's fun. I'm a policy guy by trade, so moving into the office after it had transitioned to performance work was of interest to me, and I've enjoyed it thoroughly. And look forward to the end of my tenure because I've decided to retire after this term. It's been 12 years, and I'm getting old. In any case, resources. We have a small shop for a state with a $9 billion budget. You think we'd have more than 12 professional auditors, well, 11 plus one investigator, but that's it. So it's not as if we can put out as much work as I would like, particularly when the staff are very, very careful to meet those GAGA standards, which sadly are time consuming in many ways. Most of our budget comes not from the general fund, but we have an internal service fund approved both by finance and management and the federal government because it funds the work both on the financial audit and the compliance audit. And again, the compliance audit is required of every state and major city to ensure that you are complying with the statutes and rules surrounding the federal programs that are funded to us directly. So we basically charge every entity within state government, all the agencies and departments, an amount of money that reflects both their budget and how much federal money they get. And again, that's approved by everybody and their brother, so it's all good. But that's about 90% of our budget. We work normally, or we used to work across the street from you guys, directly across from the tax department, that funny little yellow Victorian building, but it's been closed for a year and a half because of the flood, which is too bad. I'm not sure when, if ever, we'll get back in there. It remains to be seen. What we do with those resources, both human and capital, are to do GAGAS performance audits. And we also do on occasion memoranda to you folks and others in the administration and non-GAGAS investigative reports that are still very strict in terms of their performance. People understandably ask me, well, how do you choose the audit topics? And that's a very good question. And obviously part of the consideration is the money. Is it a big enough program to warrant the time involved? Because the auditors get paid pretty well. And one of your colleagues from the Senate, Randy Brock, when he was auditor for a term back in the aughts, I think he was elected in 2004 for one term, he had a lot of trouble attracting and retaining high-level auditors. So he went through HR and got for us what I think DFR also has, which is called market factor adjustment. So it allows us to pay them a little bit more than would be the case under the normal collective bargaining agreement. And thankfully, it has worked. We can attract and retain very high quality people. In any case, so the money is part of it because our work is not cheap. That's why I'm so interested in healthcare. It's almost 20% of the state's GDP. It costs the state a small fortune. By the way, we're not going to talk about substance for the most part today, but you may not know this, but the state as an employer, we are self-insured, although Blue Cross administers the program for the state. The last time I checked, which was for 2023, the cost of providing healthcare to state employees and their families was $200 million. And when you add in teachers and school employees of various types, it's $500 million a year. So in the context of the ongoing and I think appropriately ongoing conversation about how to raise the money for education, how much to spend and for what, if you don't hear people talking about the desperate need to reduce the cost of healthcare, then they're not covering all the bases. We also take consideration of the history of the program that we're interested in auditing and whether there have been problems over the years and whether we need to keep an eye on them. And that's been the case with the Department of Economic Development, relevant to your work. We've done several jobs over there, as your chair knows. Also, programs that may not have been audited in years. Also, and I'm pleased to say that we don't always focus on the money. We have done work, which I'm very proud of, on efforts to protect elders and children. And that's not about the money at all for the most part, although the departments that have those responsibilities would say they can always do more with more money, but it's not about huge sums. It's just about whether we're meeting our obligation to kids and vulnerable elders. And we've done some of that work. The results, going back to the first two big issues, even though we hire outside firms to do the financial and compliance audits, each one of those has a measure that reflects how well the state is doing, not my office, but the state. And that is repeat findings, which nobody likes, because if you have a repeat finding, you have to do it again. It has to be audited again the next year, which is more cost. And if you have a problem with the compliance audit, the federal single audit, as it's called, the federal government, if it's bad enough, could come in and say, we're going to cut you off. You know that program where we give you $17 million? Well, we're not going to give you the 17 million until you solve this problem. That's rare, although it did happen. Mike might remember a few years back at DCF. I don't think they got up to the line, but they were threatened with losing money. In addition, for our work, the performance audits, the work results typically in recommendations to the agency or the department, and sometimes to the legislature. So we follow up on that. We don't just walk away from the work. A year out from the release of a performance audit, we go back and check, and we check looking for records and documentation, not just their word for it, but we want to find out if, in fact, and the extent to which they have adopted our recommendations, and we report on that. It usually goes to the Committee on Government Operations, but I'm leaning more towards going to the policy committees as well as GovOps. And that's also part of our performance report, even though we don't have direct control over whether the auditee adopts our recommendations, because I don't have the authority to compel anyone to do anything except give us the records necessary to do the work. That's my authority in statute. So, we do the best we can in going back to look. And if they have not adopted the recommendations and they don't have a good excuse, then when that's reported, we hope that you and your colleagues will call them in and go, hey, what's the big deal? Why aren't you adopting these recommendations? Smart people and sometimes smart ass people, and they're both good, ask me periodically, so who audits you, Mr. Auditor? And that's a great question. The answer is, we are subject, as all state audit offices are, to something called a periodic peer review. Typically, it's every 3 years, and the national organization that represents auditors, controllers, and state treasurers selects a group of 3 auditors from around the country, usually 3 for us because we're a small shop, 3 auditors from around the country, and they come to Vermont. And nobody ever says, no, I won't go to Vermont, because it's always in the summer. And they review, for us, typically 3 to 5 reports, depending on their size and complexity, to make sure that, in fact, we have met all of the stringent requirements of GAGAS, the Generally Accepted Government Auditing Standards, referred to colloquially as the Yellow Book. And if you don't pass that review, you've got a problem, both within your shop and also in terms of how your office and your work is viewed both by you folks and the general public. So it's a big deal. And ultimately, it reinforces the need for us to do the kind of crazy quality control that we do. And we are almost never called out about the work itself. An auditee may complain that we misunderstood something or weren't privy to the latest material or whatever. It's not uncommon for a secretary or a commissioner to be a little defensive and concerned about findings and recommendations, even though, they're always supported by documentation. And that's the point. We recently had an occasion where after a report was issued, the commissioner of the department said they got it wrong. Well, excuse me, but that's not possible. There's not one word in any of those reports that's not supported by documentation, period. And that makes it really easy for me to sign my name to them, to present them to you, and to share them with the people of this state. So you can complain about our findings. You can complain, well, they didn't consider this, or, there's lots of ways to come at this stuff. but to the extent that we have reported findings, conclusions, and recommendations, they're spot on. So as for who audits us, I don't care because we're ready. That's basically the overview of the office. And I think we probably have a little time left, maybe more than a little. I wasn't expecting to have time to talk about substantive things or the office general. So if you have any questions, I really am. I'm sorry that I can't be seen. Not that you're missing much, but
Any
It's just-
questions?
anyway, if you got any questions, we got a few minutes.
Okay.
Yeah, we got Dave Bosch. I'm from Rutland too, Wallingford, Clarendon, West Rutland, Rutland Town. I'm curious to know if you ever have the need and what might trigger it to get down and look at town level finances and audit those for whatever reason.
That's a very good question. A lot of other states require the state auditor to include municipal work in their portfolio. We do not. The Constitution says very little about my office, but statute defines my work as limited largely to state government. All state entities are subject to audit by my office. All records are available to my office, and I mean all of them. Nobody can say you can't have that. But we can follow federal and state money into municipalities. Having said that, I always have to ask myself the question, with limited resources, is this going to be of value to the whole state if I'm looking narrowly at a question within a municipality, unless it reverberates out or has meaning for all municipalities? That I could justify. But as a rule, we don't, with one exception. And that is, sadly, a number of years ago, actually just before I took office in 2013, my chief auditor and one team member did some work on TIF, because TIF had started in a sort of, seesaw way. It wasn't consistent within statute. It just started with Burlington and Milton because of Husky and a few other things. And so reports were issued and the legislature said, we really ought to clean this up. Let's get VEPSI involved to have some rules. We can help do that. The tax department needs to be involved. So they did all that. They didn't solve all the problems, but it's much more coherent and sensible now. And if you don't know, some of the new folks, TIF is tax increment financing. It is a program not unique to Vermont. It's all over the country. It's a little complicated for today. I would be happy to come back and talk about it because, in fact, I want to come back and talk about it. We're drafting a memo about the subject. We've now had so much experience with it. And I think it's likely the administration is going to come in and ask you guys to take a position on expanding the program. And I think there's some reasons to be very cautious about that. In any case, to your question, Representative Bosch, we are required to do audits of every TIF district 3 times during its life cycle, which means that my successor will be doing TIF audits into the 2030s. And I'm laughing, but it's not funny because we've learned a lot, which we're going to share with you about the program. And the Joint Fiscal Office has done some excellent work on this, issued 2 reports in 18 and 22. And I think there's might be another one coming this year. But I'm not sure I want to continue doing as much TIF work as we have been doing. And maybe it's time for the whole thing to be reconsidered. But that gets us into the town, but only for the TIF district, not for general municipal matters.
Understood. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And I think there was one time in my town in Coventry that we had asked, not you, Doug, but a previous auditor to come in and take a look at what was some issues that were going on with the town clerk and treasurer at that time. But it's very seldom that they get involved in this work.
Yeah, and it's not because I'm not interested, but my resources are limited. And my predecessor liked working at the local level. He came up through local government and he knew a fair number of people and thought that he was making a difference. And I think he probably was at the local level, but I just have a different sense of how to prioritize my limited resources.
I think I'm sure, Doug, I'm probably gonna have lots of conversations with you about TIF stuff, so I think it probably should
it's probably not the time for it.
No, that's all right.
Other questions for state auditor?
By the way, Mike, I don't think the Coventry situation was ever resolved.
No, not in the courts anyway. We did receive an insurance settlement.
Ah, okay, good.
Yeah, Mr. Haver, Herb Olson, Bristol, Lincoln, Moncton, Starksville. I just want to give a little shout out and appreciate some of the reports you've done. I think you pointed out, the extent to which healthcare costs are a real problem. I particularly enjoyed your report, or not enjoyed, but found very valuable your report on reference-based pricing. I think it sparked a lot of interest in a lot of other entities as well as non-governmental organizations. So I think that's a good thing. I thank you for that.
Well, thank you. Appreciate it. And that story continues, of course. The Green Mountain Care Board is working hard, but it's a slog.
Other questions? Okay, Doug, thank you for joining us. We'll get you back in sometime when you have more time. And I think, as you said, when we start seeing what is being brought to us by the administration, we'll certainly want to have you in to have those discussions.
Well, I appreciate that. Thanks for the time, and you get to take your break a little early. Everybody wins.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it. Thank you all. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so at 11, we have Rick going through H99 with us, and then we'll take testimony on that this afternoon. So we'll take a break now until 11, and please be here promptly at 11 so we can get